South African farmland redistribution. South Africa is currently in the midst of a complex social and political crisis. The situation concerns the newest measures proposed by the South African government in regards to farmland redistribution. Land is a hugely divisive issue in South Africa, where the majority of individually owned farms are still in white hands 24 years after the end of white minority apartheid rule and centuries of brutal colonial dispossession. As part of long-promised reforms to redress racial disparities in land, the African National Conference in December adopted a resolution to expropriate land without compensation for redistribution to landless black South Africans. On February 27th this year, South Africa's Parliament overwhelmingly voted to begin a process to amend Section 27 of the Constitution to allow expropriation without compensation. Because the ANC holds a majority of well over 2/3, there does not appear to be any political barriers preventing this measure being passed. The decision has generated a storm of gigantic proportions, as politicians, citizens, white farmers and commentators anticipate either a moment of salvation or social and economic disaster. Land policy is at the centre of the storm, and the fissures which critically intersect this debate are built upon deep racial, cultural, historical and economic picket lines, and the policy itself is designed to further address these pillars, promising restitution, redistribution and tenure reform. Previously promised commitments to land reform have been slow, with governments reporting that, so far, only 9% of commercial farmland has been transferred through restitution and redistribution. Government figures indicate that 72% of private land remains in white hands and only 4% is owned by blacks, with the remaining accounted for by other racial groups. AgriSA disputes these figures and says that about 27% of agricultural land is owned by black citizens. Conflicting data and lack of accurate information on land reform and the rural economy allows much of public debate to be misinformed and is a serious constraint on policy making. The main opposition, the Democratic Alliance, have opposed the policy since its inception. The Democratic Alliance say that land expropriation without compensation undermines property rights in South Africa, and these actions are worrying markets, economists and farming groups, warning of a potentially devastating impact on the agricultural sector. Broader concerns are arising in regards to parallels with the land grab and complex economic headache which similar reforms caused in Zimbabwe 2 decades ago. This situation is only proliferated by the involvement of international governments and the alleged escalation of racially charged violent attacks on white farm landowners. So what next? We have a town hall to run. So let's hear from the stakeholders and the different parties involved.